welcome to the Global Church Project. I'm Graham Hill. Elisa Padilla is Executive Director for the Kairos Foundation. Kairos works through publishing, theological education, community ministries, and the Kairos Retreat Center to encourage disciples of Jesus to live out their faith in everyday life. Elisa and her family live in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Elisa Padilla, welcome to the Global Church Project. You're the Executive Director of the Kairos Foundation. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us something about the vision of the foundation and the ministries that it does?
The vision of Kairos is, I guess it's been building up since 1976. In Argentina, it was time of military dictatorship, and a group of professional Christians started thinking about how faith connects to everyday life. And so they worked on developing a study program to help pastors get in contact with reality and help professionals to connect with their faith. And so that was the first program, theological studies, interdisciplinary, focusing on family, work, society, and church. Mm. And from there, from everyday life, going into theology and social sciences and Bible. Mm. Publications then became a means for spreading ideas and reflections, not only from people in Kairos, but from all over Latin America. Mm. So Ediciones Kairos functions as the printed vehicle for compiling what's going on in theological thinking and practice, and spreading it again all over Latin America and in Spanish-speaking North America. In 1990, the Argentine chapter of Irene, focusing on families and marriage, tried to find a place where retreats could be organized, especially focusing on couples. And so this beautiful place was acquired with the first intention to have retreats for married couples and for all couples that were just starting on their way. And in the crisis of 2001, then community ministries got started as a way to help churches respond to what was going on in society. Economically, with the financial collapse and many professionals being left out on the street without jobs. Kairos has grown-up children now. So Irene, since 2007, 2008, has become its own organization and is very developed. City, the theological studies, has gone continental with its administration being in Costa Rica, and there's a continental team working in different countries. It's been translated into English and been connected with Infimit, adapted to Africa and Asia. And our newly born is community services called Community and Change, which now this year is starting independently as an organization. So now we have this retreat center and publications. And what's new in the last year and a half is the development of a small community, trying to put into practice everything that's being said in books and conferences in our daily life.
And what does the rhythms of daily life look like in this small community?
It's very daily routines, like taking children to kindergarten, sharing meals, taking care of the grounds, feeding the animals, working on special projects, make new games for the children, or cutting down a tree or preparing wood for the fire in the winter, or cleaning the pool. And in that daily work, we touch issues that have to do with identity of children who don't know who their father is, issues that have to do with fear because of family violence.
Mm.
So this coming Wednesday, we'll be participating in a march against the femicides that are being so prevalent in Argentina. Dealing with pains of separation and divorce, pains of losing a child, the challenges posed for a teacher in university or in a special school for handicap or in a high school with very wealthy people. Those are the different connections and realities of the people that live here in Kairos.
How do you come into contact with people in the life of this community? So is it that these are people who live in this neighbourhood, or how does it happen?
It's a network that's built up over the decades, really. Part of the members are from our local church, who a decade later have connected again. The local church has worked very closely with a drug rehab center, and that's where one of our families has come from after an episode of serious, almost death, violence at home. And living in community and trying to put into practice integral mission, we connect at the same time with other initiatives in other parts of the country that are trying to do the same kind of thing.
You've probably answered this question, but I wanted to ask you about what does integral mission look like in practice? And the reason I ask you this question is because as a phrase, there's a risk that it's overused or that it's conceptual rather than practical. The church likes to grab a hold of these buzzwords, but when it's lived out on the ground, what does integral mission look like?
It's so integral that it touches on every aspect of life. I could name everything, but I'll try. What kind of a car do I drive? We've opted for old cars, as long as they're not too contaminating of the environment, which puts us in a position that we can drive into poor areas of the city and don't feel threatened. It has to do with the food that we eat, our vegetable garden, how we spend our money, who we give priority to in our community, the voices that we heed. Do we listen only to those that have all the vocabulary to speak very wisely, apparently, or do the people who don't usually have a voice have a voice? And I feel like here their voice is so loud that they make up the voice of this community. More than many of us that have all the right words. It has to do with the things we talk about with the children. We have 7 children living here between 5 months and 11 years old. And so we must address issues of that have to do with the environment, how we recycle our garbage, how we treat each other, the issues we talk about, personal things that are very deep, and trying to connect deeply with each other. It just touches on all areas of life, really.
And I get the sense that God speaks to us most loudly through the least of these. The temptation in the church, I think, is to listen to everyone else except for the least of these, and then probably definitely miss the voice of the Spirit in that process. I want to ask you about partnership with the poor. I'm not quite sure how to phrase this question, but there's a temptation. I don't think it's just a Western temptation to advocate for or do things for those who are in poverty, and to forget about what it means to be in genuine partnership. But what are your thoughts about how the Church of Jesus Christ might more effectively partner with communities rather than, presume to do things for them?
What I feel is that many times there's a very pragmatic emphasis on the way things are done, because we want to reach certain objectives. And so we plan and we make projects. And I feel like people must not become projects. They're people. And you befriend. And I feel like when one has the idea that you're going to give, you miss the point. You realize that really you need to be transformed by them. Because there are insights that people who, like for instance, Sonia here, she grew up with an alcoholic mother, and she knows what it is to go through garbage looking for food. She can tell you about realities that we don't understand. We can't even grasp God in action, or through someone else that was victim of violence and had no place to go and receive love. Her understanding of God and of God's love is something that we can't even imagine. It's so small because we've had so much. Or the comment of a friend who lived with us, he had just come off of the street and he found out he had AIDS. And his understanding of 2 years of living under God's mercy had meant more than his previous 40 years. He died with AIDS. His understanding, his grasp of God was so much deeper than what we can. And there are insights into what counts really. And so it's really interesting because this last 2 weeks ago we had this conference with Ron Sider on the gospel and social action, social responsibility, and the presentation of his book of Rich Christians in the Age of Hunger. And the 60 people that were here were all from middle class. And so little do we understand. We understand the rich Christians, but we don't understand the age of hunger. And so I made a point of having every person in Kairos that comes from that background, for there to be one person in each group. And it's amazing how in each one of those groups, out of 10 people, one of them was from this context, and how their voice was so strong and constantly brought the group down to earth, down to understanding what it is that we're talking about when we talk about hunger. And this idea of the beneficiaries is one perspective. Who's the beneficiary, I react a lot to that way of seeing people. And a common reaction of these people in the groups when we talked about the poor, they say, the poor. I mean, in Spanish, the word pobre is also used for something that's deficient. And so they reacted to being called poor. The poor, I have a lot to give. Who says I'm pobre? No?
And I wonder how much of it is a Western way of thinking, or whether it's a human problem. This temptation to always categorize others.
In relation.
And often to categorize them as the deficient other or as the needy other. Whether there is something Western in that approach, or whether it's just a human problem. We all do it to each other. What's your thoughts about?
Well, I think, I don't know this category of Western, because we're very Western and the poor are all Western, and now in this globalized world, I don't know what's Western and what isn't. But I think there's something that intrinsically affects the human being that has to do with the wealth that's accumulated, the amount of things. We lived 12 years in a very poor area, and it's true, death was much more daily. Shootings and suicides and everything was so deep and felt suffering, right? But people were a lot more sharing, a lot more open, a lot more community oriented. I don't have the two things that you cannot have. You can go without everything, but you cannot not have sugar and mate. If you don't have, I share what I have with you. I'm preparing a meal and my family arrives, just pour water to the soup. And in that context, our middle class values were so challenged. The whole idea of private property, my space. It was hard for us, to have people just coming at any time to our house, but that's the way they live. They share things a lot more. And moving into a middle class area, people are a lot more distant, more separated. Sufferings are covered up a lot more. People who don't have a lot of things are a lot more authentic. And we have a hard time being authentic because we're so surrounded by our junk and our status and our image, and I don't know what it is.
What does discipleship to Jesus look like?
What does it look like? Personally, for me, it's really important to have some time alone. It begins with my daily chores, my marital relationship, my relationship to my children, now as adults, openly dialoguing with critical thinkers that challenge my faith constantly and who are very influenced by the secularism of today. Putting aside any sense of ownership of the truth. And I think what's made Christians very hard to dialogue with is this idea that we own the truth, and we understand, we know who the way is, and we know what people should believe. And I find that we need to do a lot more dialoguing with our context and with people that are more in harmony with God's will for His humanity than many Christians who seem utterly incoherent. Just today we got the news that a group of young people who had started a project in a church building that had been abandoned. The church had basically died. And so they asked to use the place for the last year and a half to make like a cultural center, opening up to the neighborhood and having, giving emphasis on dance and music and art. And we get the news today that the owners of the church, of that space, have decided to tear down the building, take it back for their own, build offices. And see, that's something that, again, offices of Christianity. And who wants more offices of Christianity? And so they're leaving this group of young university students with a whole new perspective of Christians in service to society, and who interact and who learn and who offer a space of new kind of relationships and interaction with culture. They replace that now by offices of Christianity. So I think discipleship of Christ today means learning to do away with those paradigms that have us stuck into offices and understand that God's action is very strong out there where we don't imagine. So I think I grew up a church-centered person, and I'm trying to understand the ticking of society now. And I think it's globally there's a exodus of the traditional church. And so it puts me into places where I need to rethink and re-understand. And so for me, what I try to do is open up spaces in which I am just one more voice, and trying to listen to the voices of the voiceless, and of younger people, and I can just contribute what I've learned up to now. But
And what gives you hope? Where do you see the signs of the Spirit moving and you think, hey, this gives me hope?
Right now, I think there's a movement of community that goes much more beyond Sunday church. Spaces in which really, when we talk about diversity, it's one thing to be diverse on Sundays, but it's very different to be diverse in everyday life and interaction. It's one thing to talk about horizontality in a church, and even in a church is very revolutionary, and talk about horizontality in a community where everyone's opinion is important, and where they're different functions, they're not different categories. So I see a hope in that. And I think communities have the capability, maybe not in transforming the laws that have to do with femicide, and that are allowing for that to happen, for example, in Argentina, but we can receive someone who's been abused and provide a platform to restore her whole life, or her whole life. And the same with someone who's been very hurt by the loss of a son, or I'm accompanying right now a person who was adopted during the military dictatorship, and finding out how many people are suffering because of their lack of identity, because of human trafficking of babies, and during the dictatorship, the adoption of babies born from disappeared people. There's that whole movement in which grandparents and families are trying to find the children that were robbed during those years. And I find hope in that.
Thank you for joining us at the Global Church Project. The Global Church Project is located at www.theglobalchurchproject.com. On our website, you'll find a wide range of interviews and resources for colleges, universities, and churches. I look forward to your company next time. From me, goodbye.